In the year 1300, justice was not blindfolded. The law was a living entity, influenced by rumors in the village square and the uproar of a crowd. If you broke a rule, your fate was not determined by truth, but by the way your name echoed through the crowded streets and the passion of those who accused you. Accusation alone could swiftly lead to a sentence, setting the stage for suffering. Jails were grim, reeking of anticipation rather than punishment. Fingers and tongues faced consequences for wrongdoing, while bodies served as warnings to deter others from straying. Welcome to a world where fairness was often compromised by chance, not justice. Step into the realm of medieval justice, where fairness was not based on evidence, but on gossip, influence, and reputation. This world lacked the courtroom dramas we are familiar with today, but was rich with stories passed down through generations. Justice was not impartial. It was as unpredictable as a worn-out tapestry. In this society, truth often succumbed to the weight of reputation, turning justice into a chaotic spectacle. Reputation was fragile yet crucial in medieval times. A mere accusation could trigger widespread suspicion, spreading like wildfire through close-knit communities. Being caught in a scandal was not about truth, but about perception. Rumors weaved a fabric of hearsay that sometimes distorted justice beyond recognition. Judges, often local elites or officials, made weighty decisions based on stories intertwined with community life. In this setting, where justice unfolded in impromptu gatherings, the law was more about orchestrating social drama than seeking truth. Accusations were influenced by the accuser's identity and status. Justice often leaned in favor of the accuser's power, whether derived from wealth, piety, or social connections. It was less about the crime and more about the social hierarchy of the accuser and accused. This environment turned the medieval courtroom into a complex web of personal grudges and strategic maneuvers. Despite truth's efforts to prevail, it often drowned under alliances and power struggles. The crowd added volatility to the drama, with their emotions and superstitions swaying justice as much as any evidence, which was scarce at the time. The court of public opinion frequently judged before any official verdict was reached. Villagers' reactions shaped the proceedings significantly, with their voices reverberating through the streets as a potent force. Trials in this era were governed by a tapestry of influence, perception, and community dynamics. In the medieval era, trials were not only about dispensing justice, but also about putting on a performance, turning the courtroom into a communal stage where the judge played the role of a playwright. Due to limited literacy, the proceedings of justice resembled poetry and legal language. Each trial was a public event, a societal ceremony that reinforced norms through a theatrical presentation that every medieval citizen could comprehend. The characters in this drama were well defined: the stern judge, the nervous defendant, and the vocal crowd, all contributing to a memorable story ingrained in the community's memory. Justice during this period often led to tangible and harsh consequences. With few opportunities for redemption, punishments focused more on deterrence than rehabilitation. Executioners symbolized the brutal truths of medieval justice, carrying out the final verdict swiftly and publicly. The fear of execution loomed over every stage of a trial, emphasizing the fragility of life and the severity of consequences. Medieval justice was marked by contradictions, where fairness struggled against power and spectacle. Despite its outdated principles, this system effectively maintained social order, often in practical ways. The remnants of these practices laid the foundation for modern legal systems, highlighting the evolution towards impartiality. Through the lens of history, we see not only the brutality of medieval justice, but also humanity's ongoing quest to balance justice, authority, and individual rights, a pursuit that remains relevant today. In medieval villages and towns, where communities were tightly knit and anonymity was rare, accusations often began as whispers laden with impending disaster. A seemingly innocent comment from a neighbor, driven by envy or malice, could spiral into a storm of suspicion and fear. Gossip around shared spaces like wells or pastures could unravel lives like a thread pulling apart fabric. Words carried immense power, shaping perceptions and creating an atmosphere of doubt where innocence offered little protection. Authority figures such as priests and lords amplified these rumors, turning idle chatter into communal condemnation. A simple gesture or nod could instill fear of divine retribution or political persecution, leaving the accused trembling at the prospect of defying societal expectations. In this environment, medieval law relied less on evidence and more on perceptions and influences from those in positions of power. The charisma and power of the accuser turned accusations into a form of theater, creating a spectacle that satisfied the community's desire for order in times of chaos. Accusations placed the community itself in the role of judge and jury, with each individual becoming an unofficial juror who could influence destinies through whispers of support or silent condemnation. Public spaces like market squares, church grounds, and taverns became arenas for these informal trials, where gossip served as evidence and truth was as fluid as the wine that fueled discussions. In a society with limited literacy and legal knowledge, verdicts often emerged from conversations over drinks and heartfelt prayers, often delivering judgments long before any formal court procedures took place. Those accused lived in fear during these episodes, knowing that one wrong move or word could forever tarnish their reputation. No one, not even the nobility, was exempt from this social scrutiny. While the wealthy and titled were somewhat shielded from severe consequences, they still faced the looming threat of scandal. Accusations leveled the playing field, affecting both commoners and aristocrats alike, subjecting all to the swift and merciless impact of rumors and fear. Confession was seen as the linchpin of medieval justice, prized for its perceived clarity that could bypass the ambiguity of suspicion. While torture was not universally employed, methods like the rack and thumb crew were used to extract confessions, emphasizing closure over truth. Confessions obtained through pain and desperation became twisted symbols of justice, emphasizing coerced narratives over reliable evidence. For the accused, confessing meant not only personal ruin, but spiritual defeat, fracturing their sense of self and status. Communities grappled with conflicted emotions, offering both judgment and sympathy towards those who confessed. This shared narrative reinforced the importance of submission to authority, instilling hope that mistakes could be rectified, righteousness would be rewarded, and survival depended on strict adherence to societal norms. As confessions solidified outcomes, surveillance of the accused intensified, turning their lives into a public drama where every action was scrutinized. The accused were forced to play their roles on the stage of bustling markets and tranquil churchyards under constant watch. Continuous monitoring was a common practice that existed before modern surveillance techniques. Every vigilant observation and implicit control mechanism was put in place to ensure obedience and commitment to maintaining order. Rituals and ceremonies were used to entangle the accused, integrating events of accusation into the broader framework of societal control. These rituals, not meant for celebration or isolation, became deeply rooted in daily life, reflecting and reinforcing the social hierarchy. From public punishments to cautionary folklore passed down through generations, the lives of the accused were intertwined with communal rhythms. Their trials served as powerful reminders of human shortcomings and societal strengths. Villagers found themselves unwitting participants in a stark theatrical performance, engaged in rituals that upheld authority through everyday routines and formal ceremonies. Even as accusations faded, their impact endured, casting long shadows over lives touched by their stories. Relationships strained under the weight of these events, leaving lasting marks that persisted long after the accused were forgotten. Whispers of tales carried across time, weaving caution into the fabric of the community. These lingering accusations acted as ghostly reminders, ensuring that their spectral lessons guided future generations through the intricate paths of memory and tradition. In the medieval perspective, crime was not just a violation of societal norms. It was seen as a disruption in the very fabric of the universe, a sin that demanded divine intervention. The practice of trial by ordeal was based on this belief, relying on the idea that God would not allow the innocent to suffer injustice. Envision a medieval village where the entire community congregates in the town square, watching intently as the accused stands before a magistrate who relies on divine forces to reveal the truth. Here, amidst the murmurs of the crowd, the accused undergoes harrowing trials that merge justice with religious zeal. Accusations of theft or witchcraft could lead individuals to carry scorching iron bars, walk over burning coals, or submerge limbs into boiling water, with only divine intervention determining guilt or innocence. A festering wound was seen as a sign of guilt, while a healing wound indicated innocence. While these trials may seem brutal by today's standards, in a time when religious beliefs permeated daily life, they held a certain logic. The community watched on, anticipating that the divine would communicate through fire and flesh, revealing the truth by flames and blisters. Among these ordeals, fire was a formidable judge, turning a courthouse scene into a fiery spectacle where the accused's fate was decided through searing trials overseen by a priest. The practice was not merely about seeking revenge, but rather seen as a divine test. Days later, the wounds would be carefully examined. Healing wounds were considered a sign of salvation, while festering ones indicated a grim fate. Through these rituals, human law and divine justice intertwined, casting shadows over both the individual and the integrity of medieval justice. Water also held a significant place in these proceedings. The ordeal of cold water symbolized purity and rebirth. The accused, bound and thrown into consecrated water, faced a test that seemed illogical. If they floated, it was believed that the water rejected their guilty soul. If they sank, it was seen as a sign of purity. Onlookers from the community whispered prayers and shared rumors, waiting for justice to unfold through ripples and splashes. To modern eyes, this test may seem strange, resembling chance rather than divine intervention. However, for the medieval people deeply rooted in faith, it was a serious event in a divine narrative. Wounds told a story of their own. After enduring harsh trials, the accused underwent scrutiny from priests and officials. Their wounds were seen as pages where divine messages were written. Detailed inspections were carried out over days, with each injury narrating stories of guilt or innocence. A clean, healing wound granted freedom, while a festering wound indicated spiritual blemish and punishment. This reflected a basic understanding of health, accepted as a divine script where suffering and survival were seen as signs of moral purity or corruption. Religion was not just a background element in these trials, it was the very foundation and script. Laden with Christian rituals, these proceedings felt unquestionable, with clerics performing sacred rites that gave a sense of divine legitimacy to the earthly spectacle. In the medieval interplay of law and spirit, priests acted as mediators, weaving faith into governance so intricately that doubting the ordeal was akin to questioning divine will itself. These trials highlighted the immense influence of the Church, binding community and faith in the flawed pursuit of justice. However, cracks in this system began to show over time. The Fourth Lateran Council of 1215 marked a turning point when Pope Innocent III prohibited clergy participation in ordeals, paving the way for more legally rational approaches. As societies shifted towards written laws and logical judgment, trial by ordeal gradually faded. The Enlightenment era brought about a new approach, replacing fire and water with evidence-based investigations and testimonies. Yet, remnants of belief in divine judgment persisted in folklore and cultural memory. This transitional period in medieval justice reflects humanity's collective effort towards progress and comprehension as communities moved away from primitive ordeals towards a more rational pursuit of truth. Even as the flames extinguished and the waters calmed, faith continued to burn as a lasting ember in the hearts of those seeking enlightenment. In the realm of medieval justice, courtrooms were not just places of judgment, but stages where drama and authority played out in a grand spectacle. Picture a village gathering in a court setting, filled with peasants, farmers, and tradesmen. Whether held in a grand hall or an open area near a cathedral, these courtrooms served as venues for communities to witness power dynamics. Justice was a performance designed to uphold the authority of the Lord and the moral fabric of the village. Upon entering such courtrooms, one would not find the solemn quiet of modern legal proceedings, but a bustling atmosphere. The murmurs of the crowd, the shuffling of feet on straw-covered floors, and the loud calls of court criers announcing the day's cases. The judge, often a noble, presided from an elevated seat, his robe symbolizing power rather than impartiality. These courts reinforced social hierarchies, with peasants keenly aware of their rank. The blending of faith and governance was evident in these spaces, with divine weight lent to temporal authority, embodied by the stained glass windows casting colorful shadows on the proceedings. In this dramatic realm, authority figures such as nobles, lords, and church clerics held sway. Their power, rooted in lineage and religion, determined the fate of the accused. Lords dispensed justice through a lens clouded by social preservation, while the looming threat of divine retribution added to the gravity of the trials. Trials served as theaters where personal vendettas and communal grievances were on display, reflecting the belief that order was intricately linked to land rights and social status. Facing these earthly judges were clerics, men who wielded religious power and saw each trial as an opportunity to fulfill divine will. Trials became a blend of faith and fear, with the clerics' declarations resonating through the crowds like hymns in echoing naves. Verdicts were delivered dramatically, rich in theatrics and often influenced by the stormy skies of the era. Accusations driven by rumors or jealousy often led individuals into the court's orbit, where tensions ran high and testimonies were sometimes marred by bias. The focus was more on compelling narratives than logical arguments, with public expectations fueling the dramatic proceedings. The courtroom was less about revealing the truth and more about creating a spectacle, with societal norms shaping the outcomes. Unspoken script with personal integrity at stake. Every trial was a community affair, an event interwoven with drama and communal judgment. To medieval townsfolk, court days were highlights, cultural touchstones breaking the monotony of agrarian life. The expectation matched that of any grand festival. Participants arrived clothed in curiosity and anticipation. Within this amphitheater of justice, the audience wielded its own power, influencing decisions and embedding proceedings into local folklore. Trials unfolded like theater, with allegiances whispered among the crowd. Emotions ran high with each rhetorical flourish or divine plea. Witnesses became stars, and spin doctors bearing tales transformed by lips in the gallery. The conclusion, marked by a public verdict, brought catharsis, with justice observed, debated, and recorded not in annals but in memory and oral tradition. The process reinforced collective identity, curbing deviance and reminding all of the power structure governing their lives. In this courtly theater, outcomes were as varied as the motives that brought accused individuals before their peers. Some found repentance a tangible display, begging forgiveness in hopes of mercy. A well-placed sobbing display of remorse might sway a crowd towards leniency. Whether genuine or feigned, contrition infused proceedings with the weight of salvation, bringing a soul back from the brink by societal forgiveness. Yet not all sought refuge in humility. Others embraced their fate with defiant pride, meeting judgment without supplication, reshaping the courtroom scene and transforming the accused into heroes or martyrs. Proudly facing their fate, these figures left court as outcasts yet unbowed, their stories entwined in communal folklore that drew lines between saints and sinners, planting their tale into the ever-unfolding drama of village life, their legacy surviving long after the judge's decree. Ultimately, the courtroom was a tool of power, preserving authority with merciless precision. Medieval justice functioned on a knife's edge, a perpetual dance of governance and control, where outcomes rippled beyond the accused. Lords, driven by necessity and tradition, wielded these courts as proof of their role in maintaining peace and hierarchy. Yet the same blade threatened erosion of authority with patterns of excess. Balance and temperance tempered even this medieval sword, with mercy sitting beside cruelty, reflecting the law's grim theater. Here the dance of survival unfolded, with all actors and audience aware of their roles within the unyielding choreography of consequence. In the medieval age, jails were as much a part of life as the looming castles casting their long shadows over towns. However, unlike their modern counterparts, these jails weren't designed for rehabilitation or extended punishment. They were merely way stations, holding places where the accused lingered while the gears of justice slowly, if ever, turned. As you neared the stone walls, an icy shiver ran down your spine. The chill of dread may crawl up your spine, knowing that hidden behind those imposing facades are cold, cramped spaces filled with neglect and fear. The primary purpose of these medieval jails was simple: containment, not rehabilitation. Built in the dank cellars of fortresses or deep within cities, these jails were uncomfortable bastions. Their architecture was basic and harsh, with minimal light and poor ventilation. The floors were often packed earth or bare stone, offering no escape from the filth and decay that pervaded the spaces, shared with unwelcome vermin. This oppressive environment embodied the anxiety felt by those imprisoned within, each day blending into the next with despair. Being thrown into this disorderly realm meant embracing squalor. The clanking of chains upon entry overwhelmed the senses with the rank smell of unwashed bodies and the sour tang of fear. Rats scurried along the walls, while cries of the afflicted filled the air, piercing the oppressive silence. Cells carved from stone packed multiple individuals into narrow spaces, fostering an unbearable intimacy born of shared misfortune. Here, darkness whispered fears that plagued the mind. Sleep, fragmented and scarce, offered little respite, interrupted by nightmares that felt all too real. Food was meager and often spoiled, challenging both health and morale. Necessities were distant memories in this stark place where hope clung tenuously to consciousness. These jails also served a darker purpose, as instruments of power, designed to crush one's spirit until confessions, whether genuine or coerced, were extracted from lips swollen with fear. Life inside was a grueling ordeal, testing mental and spiritual endurance daily. The physical confinement mirrored the psychological torment, with hope barely flickering on the horizon. Communication between guards and prisoners was sparse and laced with the threat of violence. Faith became a lifeline for those inside, with prayers providing a rhythm through the long, lonely hours. Even amidst despair, threads of camaraderie emerged among captives, finding solace in whispered stories and shared dreams of freedom beyond the grim walls. Every rumor and snippet of outside news carried the weight of countless hopes and fears. The looming prospect of judgment felt more like an encroaching shadow than a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Time warped unpredictably in the cycle of anticipation and despair. For months, even years, they languished in prison, their existence fading into obscurity amidst the ever-changing landscape of medieval justice. Prisoners braced themselves for whatever fate awaited them, whether it be freedom, ransom, or the ultimate punishment. However, not all experiences behind bars were the same in medieval society. Wealth and status played a significant role in determining one's time in confinement, shaping the quality of their surroundings and the privileges they could access. Nobles often found their incarceration more bearable, not due to the conditions, but because of the advantages money could afford them. In this world, justice was often a distant concept, overshadowed by the struggle for survival within a system focused on maintaining its distorted form of order. The foundations of these prisons hold a story that still resonates faintly in today's understanding of justice and imprisonment, revealing a world more concerned with power than fairness. Innocence and guilt were often determined by fate or fortune rather than facts, underscoring the harsh realities of the time. This historical narrative serves as a cautionary tale, prompting reflection on the importance of striving for true equity in our present systems. The echoes of medieval justice remind us that the shadows cast by the past can influence our choices today. In the Middle Ages, justice operated on a unique currency of economic retribution and public humiliation, aimed at maintaining social order. Punishment was not just about inflicting pain, but also about enforcing societal norms. The disparity in punishments highlighted the vast social inequalities of the time. For the wealthy, fines were a preferred form of punishment, offering an escape from more severe consequences and reinforcing the notion that wealth equated to worth. In contrast, fines could devastate peasants, pushing them further into poverty and perpetuating social divisions. The commodification of crime through fines instilled fear in those who had little else to offer. Public punishment, such as the stocks and pillories, was not simply a punitive measure but a communal spectacle designed to shame offenders. Placed in prominent squares and marketplaces, these symbols of justice exposed the convicted to public ridicule and scorn, emphasizing the power dynamics at play in medieval society. Decaying vegetables and occasionally a stray stone were found among the items thrown during this ritual. Ranging from minor theft to serious offenses, this practice served as a somber reminder that crime had real and often humiliating consequences. The purpose of individuals being restrained in stocks or pillories was to break their spirit, while also strengthening bonds within the community. Each taunt or thrown object was a form of communal participation in the process of justice and spectacle. This public engagement transformed punishment from an individual experience to a shared societal duty. Participating in this ritual not only upheld the moral values of the time, but also highlighted how medieval people navigated relationships such as friendship, rivalry, and camaraderie, using public shame to unite their community. For peasants, fines were a heavy burden, threatening to push them further into poverty. Even minor offenses were penalized with fines meant to discourage future wrongdoing. In an agricultural society where every coin counted towards the next meal, these fines risked plunging families into financial ruin. The cycle of poverty continued as land, homes, or essential resources for the upcoming harvest were lost to the demands of justice. The concept of wergild or man price, which was a form of compensation for injury or death, also illustrated the significant economic impact fines could have. While intended to provide restitution, fines often imposed a crushing financial strain on peasants who had limited means. This medieval justice system was as biased as the social hierarchy in which it operated, showing that justice was not always impartial even when expressed in monetary terms. In contrast, the nobility played by different rules, using their privileged positions to negotiate behind closed doors and avoid harsh penalties faced by commoners. In the courts, familial influence and financial resources often led to more lenient outcomes for the nobility, providing them with layers of protection inaccessible to poorer individuals. When nobles did receive fines, these were often symbolic gestures rather than true punishments, meant to maintain appearances rather than enforce justice. The privileged few navigated the legal system with ease, leveraging their influence to preserve their status. Meanwhile, for peasants, the legal system appeared designed to keep them in a perpetual state of disadvantage. The nobility benefited from the same system, showcasing how closely medieval justice intertwined with social hierarchies. Ironically, the spectacle of medieval justice relied on community participation. Observing a villager in stocks or being fined wasn't a solitary act, but a lesson for both the offender and the community about the repercussions of deviating from societal norms. Public punishment served as a clear deterrent wrapped in a community event. Amidst the chaos of collective condemnation and ceremonial involvement, prevailing hierarchies were reinforced. The medieval justice system was a complex tapestry woven with contradictions. Laws aimed at preventing crime often exacerbated inequalities, where one's social status sometimes held more weight than the offense committed. As peasants struggled under burdensome penalties they could not bear, and nobility skirted consequences with minimal trouble, the concept of justice's intended fairness was called into question. The system operated with a grim efficiency, stemming from a time when fear was instrumental in upholding the authority of those positioned high above the common populace. Within this intricate framework, instances of compassion occasionally emerged, such as communities rallying against severe punishments or nobles showing mercy to their subordinates out of sheer grace. These fleeting glimpses of humanity illuminated a landscape dominated by stark contrasts of power and powerlessness. Thus, medieval justice not only functioned as a mechanism of order, but also painted a vivid picture of a world constantly teetering between control and disorder. If this intriguing glimpse into medieval life has piqued your interest, give us a like. For more gritty tales from the darker side of history, subscribe to Medieval Grime. We present history in a raw, salty, and slightly irreverent manner. Thank you for watching. Stay gritty, and we'll catch you next time by the fireside. In the harsh era of the 1300s, theft was a crime born out of desperation and opportunity, serving as a grim reflection of the unforgiving realities of medieval society. A hungry peasant might resort to stealing a loaf of bread from a market stall or an unattended bucket, while in urban areas, more skilled thieves like pickpockets found wealth in swift thefts of coins. In a society where survival hung on the brink of poverty and famine, The looming threat of punishment was both brutal and definitive. The severance of a hand, a law rooted in the principles of retribution and deterrence, aimed to eliminate the threat by removing the offending limb. Such punishments were not carried out in secrecy, but rather played out as public spectacles in town squares, where communities gathered to witness a thief face justice. On wooden platforms, the condemned would stand, often bound tightly in ropes, expressing regrets or curses to an indifferent audience. Hands were placed on rough chopping blocks slick with the remnants of prior penalties. As the executioner's axe was raised, a collective gasp would seize the crowd, amidst a cacophony of murmurs and cries. This was not just a legal act, but an integral part of the communal rituals that defined medieval life. The thief's anguish reverberated, mingling with the everyday sounds of market vendors and clanging tools. Losing a hand signified more than just physical injury. The loss of status and dignity was symbolized by the punishment, which forever marked a person as a transgressor. In medieval times, work was essential for survival, and losing one's hands meant losing the ability to farm, create, or defend oneself. While a thief might avoid death, their identity was permanently tainted, relegating them to the outskirts of society. The power of speech was also feared, with severe consequences for those who used it for deceit, discord, or blasphemy. Lying, blaspheming, or inciting rebellion could result in having one's tongue removed, a harsh punishment meant to purge harmful words from the community. This act went beyond physical pain, as speech was seen as a divine gift and a core aspect of one's identity. Being silenced made individuals into ghostly figures in a society that thrived on storytelling, leaving them unable to speak up, trade, or even pray aloud. In addition to amputations and tongue removals, medieval justice also employed branding and whipping to imprint societal shame onto individuals. Branding involved using hot irons to permanently mark the skin with symbols like T for thief or F for forger, publicly displaying their crimes. Whippings in town squares served as a stark reminder of societal boundaries, leaving temporary scars that carried lasting stigma. These punishments went beyond mere discipline, reinforcing social hierarchies and isolating individuals through social ostracism. Visible signs of punishment led to exclusion from tightly knit communities, impacting not only the individual, but also their family and livelihood. These forms of punishment were not just about maintaining order, but also about delineating social boundaries and solidifying hierarchies within medieval society. Punishments were often viewed through a religious lens, with the body seen as a reflection of the soul's moral standing. The clergy interpreted these acts as a form of redemption through suffering, linking crime with sin and physical punishment with spiritual atonement. The spectacle of punishment served to reinforce societal norms and maintain social order in a deeply hierarchical medieval world. Punishments in medieval times were often steeped in ritual and prayer, blurring the line between human justice and divine providence. This served to reinforce a narrative of redemption, even amidst the severity of the justice system. However, irony and absurdity were not uncommon, as the inequities and abuses of power within the system sometimes turned it into an unintended caricature. Those with means could often escape the harshest punishments, leading to dark jokes about skewed justice. Absurd juxtapositions were prevalent, such as a stolen loaf costing a hand, almost turning what should have been a serious moral lesson into a farce. The complex moral tapestry of medieval life was highlighted by this grim absurdity, existing at the crossroads of somber humor and ruthless social structures. In this era, death was a stage where justice played out its most dramatic scenes. Public executions went beyond mere punishments, serving as visceral lessons ingrained in society, acting as both a deterrent and a spectacle. Communities would gather in town squares or fields, actively participating in a macabre theater of morality rather than just being passive spectators. Each execution was carefully choreographed to emphasize the power of the local lord or the crown, with the goal of communicating societal rules to the largely illiterate population. The authority of the law and those who enforced it was reinforced through these displays. Even nobles facing execution, often with more ceremony, were not exempt from the overarching message that defying the law would lead to dishonorable consequences. The church's presence at these events added a divine approval to earthly justice, intertwining the two. Various methods of execution were employed based on the severity of the crime and the intended lesson. Hanging was the most common method, especially for thieves and highwaymen, serving as a stark reminder of the consequences of crime. For more serious offenses like treason, beheading was reserved for nobility, sometimes resulting in grotesque scenes if the executioner was inexperienced. The most brutal punishments, such as drawing and quartering, involved the literal tearing apart of the perpetrator, aiming not just to punish but to instill fear in the populace. Public lessons were taught through gruesome displays with heads boiled and mounted on spikes, limbs hung at city gates as warnings to deter others from breaking the law. At the center of these macabre tales stood the executioners, feared yet essential figures. These skilled artisans of death typically inherited their profession from their fathers, mastering the precise delivery of their grim duties. Despite the importance of their work, executioners often lived on society's fringes, shunned for their constant association with death. While both feared and sometimes respected, they took pride in maintaining their tools like a craftsman, preserving their anonymity behind masks and distance from those they served. Some formed bonds with their charges, engaging in final conversations or accepting bribes for a quicker end. Over time, some executioners gained notoriety for their efficiency, adding a morbid celebrity to their trade. Public executions became community events, blending fear with a peculiar form of entertainment. Merchants sold goods and food as the crowd awaited the spectacle, drawing people from near and far to witness justice transformed into a communal festival. Broadsides circulated stories of crimes and punishments, weaving dark humor and exaggerated accounts into regional law. These events provided witnesses an opportunity for catharsis, allowing them to reaffirm moral boundaries from a safe distance. By witnessing these executions, people explored the limits of morality and justice, reinforcing their shared identity and values. Despite the perceived invincibility of medieval justice, errors were common due to reliance on accusations rather than evidence, often leading to wrongful executions. In an era where ordeal and divine proceedings prevailed, mistakes were tragically anticipated, with accusations sometimes overshadowing the pursuit of truth. Miscarriages of justice filled history with tales of innocence discovered too late, haunting folklore with ghostly echoes of failure. The aftermath of an execution left bodies exposed to the elements as reminders of rulers' power over life's fragility. These remnants served as stark symbols of mortality, shaping the identity of townspeople and travelers alike for generations. Legends of spectral visitations by wrongfully executed souls perpetuated local lore, suggesting that even in death, justice sought to right its wrongs. These haunting reminders continue to resonate in contemporary reflections on justice, progress, and human dignity, silently weaving through history as a reminder to balance justice with empathy. Valuable lessons learned from the echoes of the past that were scaffolded. In the 1300s, the dense and towering greenwoods served as both a refuge and a dangerous test for those trying to escape the strict grip of medieval justice. These forests, including the famous Sherwood, were not just imaginary settings and stories, but real landscapes full of risks and possibilities. To vanish into the woods meant embracing a raw, untamed freedom, where laws intertwined unpredictably with the trees and shadows. Stepping into these natural fortresses meant leaving behind the structured disorder of medieval life for something more challenging and unforgiving. However, the allure of the forest was not only about hiding, but also about the undiscovered potential spread across its vast, whispering expanses. Amidst the trees, one could evade the watchful eye of medieval law, if only briefly. Yet seeking shelter in the woods offered no guarantees of safety or easy survival. Living in exile within the Greenwood was far from the idealized stories of adventure. It was a testament to desperation and resilience. Survival required following a new primal code dictated by nature and observed by the forest's creatures. Finding food was uncertain, depending on hunting or sheer luck. The forest floor, covered with leaves concealing traps, was both misleading and protective. In such a world, every step could lead to sustenance or starvation. Those who willingly entered or found themselves thrust into the woods faced harsh realities. Wild animals roamed freely, food was scarce, and shelters had to be fashioned from the earth itself. The wilderness often became a grave for many, with every rustle of leaves serving as a solemn reminder of life's delicate balance. When abandoned by the law and left in solitary exile, the forest provided a sense of community where castaways formed unlikely bonds, creating a group of outlaws and outcasts who lived by their own rules. The legendary band of outlaws surrounding figures like Robin Hood, though embellished, had roots in reality. These groups, born from adversity, established networks that defied societal norms in favor of self-imposed principles. For those branded as outlaws, such alliances offered vital protection and a rare sense of belonging. Shared trials forged bonds as strong as iron, creating a unique code of honor amidst the lawlessness of the woods. However, camaraderie came at a price. Life as an outlaw required constant vigilance against external threats and betrayal from within. Trust was as scarce as food in harsh winters, and one misstep could lead to disaster. Myths often overlook these harsh realities. Conflicts between outlaws were common, and survival sometimes necessitated abandoning comrades for personal safety. These cautious communities, glorified in tales of brave rebels, were precariously balanced on the edge of a knife, where betrayal could spark chaos. In the forest, alliances were maintained only as long as they were useful, relying on the fleeting nature of human loyalty and trust. The church cast a large shadow over those fleeing justice, threatening them with severe spiritual consequences. Excommunication meant more than just being cut off from the community. It was a banishment from God's grace. The church's pronouncement that a fugitive soul was lost cut deeper than any physical wound, as medieval society intertwined spiritual life with worldly well-being. For peasants and lower nobles on the run, being labeled as excommunicated was a terrifying prospect. Tales of divine retribution fueled this fear, with outlaws sharing stories of ghostly monks and bishops haunting their dreams. These spiritual penalties drove some to seek redemption and return to the fold of the law, showing how the fear of excommunication wielded power beyond earthly punishments. Surviving in the wild required intelligence and resilience. The natural resources of the 1300s were available for those who were resourceful. Fugitives learned to distinguish between edible plants and dangerous ones through trial and error. Shelter was built from meager materials, offering more survival than comfort against the elements. The forest could be both a friend and foe, providing shelter in summer and harsh conditions in winter. Relentless autumn rains challenged even the most cleverly constructed shelters. Choosing the wild meant a life of uncertainty and lacking societal rights. The risk of capture and punishment seemed preferable to certain death or public humiliation. Despite the hardships, heroic tales and legends emerged from the forest. These myths endured over time, romanticizing the struggles of those who became legends. Pursuers never relented in their efforts to capture lawbreakers, with sheriffs using men and hounds to track down outlaws. Every sound in the forest could signal discovery, keeping fugitives constantly on edge. Stealth became a crucial skill for survival. The thin line between freedom and fate was a constant reminder of the risks they faced. Freedom was intertwined with philosophy and fatalism, as the endless chase between the hunted and the hunters played out in the medieval world, where justice was a commodity. Privilege, rather than a right, was influenced more by the jingle of coins than noble ideals. For the poor, it was a blunt force wielding indiscriminate power. Yet for those who could afford it, justice became malleable, a shadow to be manipulated. Money flowed through medieval courts like blood, greasing fingers and turning blind eyes. The wealthy secured influence through bribery, hiring advocates or scribes to ensure the scales tipped in their favor. Obtaining papal indulgences or royal charters cloaked in the legitimacy of parchment and seal was more than avoiding punishment. It was about walking free while others suffered, turning the machinery of judgment into a finely tuned instrument of personal gain. Picture the courtroom not as a sacred hall of justice, but more as an auction where the highest bidder often determined the outcome. While justice was within reach for the wealthy, it was prohibitively expensive for the poor. Court fees, travel expenses, and the need for special attire drained the modest resources of peasants or tradesmen. Conversely, for the affluent, legal battles were a minor expense amidst their lands and titles. Time and money allowed for delaying tactics and complex maneuvers to exhaust their opponents. With coin as their ally, the justice system readily bent to their will. They could appeal to kings or settle disputes outside fair boundaries, tailored to their advantage. The cost of justice extended beyond money, weaving through social networks and political favors, creating a shield that protected the wealthy from the harsh fates reserved for less fortunate individuals. For nobles, trials were less about uncovering truth and more about diplomatic performances, steeped in privilege and kinship. Instead of facing public courts, nobles gathered in lavish chambers adorned with tapestries and history. Here, justice intertwined with politics, spoken through whispers and alliances. Nobles rarely experienced the harshness of medieval punishments. Penalties often meant house arrest or banishment, inconveniences rather than crippling consequences. Living under their own laws, nobles tailored justice to suit their desires. Surrounded by allies and advisors in a spectacle of ceremony, noble trials played out like strategic moves in a power game. Witnesses were dismissed, damning evidence crumbled under noble testimony in favor. Verdicts were often decided before the defense even spoke, with familial ties quietly but decisively influencing outcomes. Noble trials reinforced social hierarchies instead of impartially assessing guilt, emphasizing that justice flowed gently for those of noble lineage. In medieval law, clergy also enjoyed similar privileges. Privileges are granted within the protective confines of ecclesiastical courts. Offenses committed by individuals wearing sacred garments are shielded from secular authorities and judged within the sanctified walls of the church. This practice not only represents a legal anomaly, but also signifies the intricate relationship between spiritual and temporal powers. Ecclesiastical tribunals, rooted in theology and canon law, often challenged secular norms by showing leniency. Instead of harsh punishments, penitential acts were encouraged, with fines being converted into charitable donations and transgressions being absolved through prayer and devotion. The clergy's attire acted as a shield, providing a safeguard against the stricter hand of secular justice. However, this clerical immunity sometimes led to abuses, as individuals sought refuge from the harsher secular legal systems. Some pushed the boundaries of sacred rules, exposing the flaws within ecclesiastical jurisdictions and noble intentions. Despite these challenges, the system offered a form of justice that went beyond physical punishment for acts considered heretical or sinful. Redemption was attainable through confession, penance, and prayer, reflecting a pursuit of justice based on spiritual resilience. Nonetheless, scandals occasionally tarnished the moral integrity of this system, serving as a poignant reminder of the complexities inherent in any privileged structure. The combination of wealth and royal or noble pardons highlighted the enduring interplay of grace and political strategy, transforming acts of treason into displays of loyalty through a simple stroke of a pen. Pardons were not just tools for redemption, but also instruments of power, converting guilt into political currency and allegiance. Historical records from the medieval period document instances of pardons, showcasing how justice could be influenced by those in positions of authority. Securing such leniency often required cultivating relationships within courtly circles and aligning oneself strategically with powerful figures. While commoners struggled to achieve such pardons, individuals with the right connections could navigate legal proceedings with remarkable outcomes. Wealthy benefactors might have their wrongdoings overlooked in exchange for political support or advantageous marriages, underscoring how justice could be manipulated as a bargaining tool among the elite. Medieval legal systems were rife with ironies, marked by inconsistencies and conflicting paths. What might be a severe punishment for a minor offense in one jurisdiction could result in just a fine in another, revealing the disparities across different legal frameworks. Local customs and traditions heavily influenced legal outcomes, enabling nobles to exploit loopholes for personal vendettas while evading consequences due to skewed principles. In contrast, some remote communities disregarded royal decrees, opting for self-governance and relegating royal mandates to mere echoes from afar. The intricate web of fate ensnared the less fortunate, subjecting them to the caprice of blind justice. While some adeptly navigated the complexities of judicial systems, many others fell victim to chance, facing unjust accusations or suffering due to ill-timed circumstances. These stories were often recounted by firelight in modest homes, reflecting the enduring legacy of justice and power dynamics in medieval society. They live hidden in clerical records or faintly outlined documents describing feudal territories. Unacknowledged, they exist under the shadow of justice, silenced and forgotten, serving as stark reminders of the often impossible cost of survival. Their tales form a dark tapestry, woven among the strict levels of hierarchy. Though their stories are whispered and brief, they bear witness to a time when those lacking wealth or influence were marked by misfortune, amplifying the somber calls of justice against the unyielding rhythm of medieval legal systems.